Can you imagine that a small town, famous for its beautiful climate and prestigious university, could become the stage for a series of horrifying crimes? A place where people once believed they could leave their doors unlocked and walk home at midnight without a second thought. That all changed when three young, intelligent, beautiful, and ambitious women suddenly vanished into the night. From bloodstains on a pedestrian bridge, to blood found on a car seat, to a hidden cabin deep in the woods. This case shook the community to its core. This is the story of Rex Krebs, a construction worker with a kind face and a soul as dark as the crimes he committed. So who was he? What drove him to attack such innocent victims? You're about to enter one of the most disturbing cases in California's history. An investigation full of shocking twists, chilling evidence, and a deeply controversial ending. If you're drawn to dramatic, real-life crime stories and want to join us on future investigations, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's uncover the chilling truth behind today's case. It was the night of November 12th, 1998. After a fun evening with friends at Tortilla Flats, a lively bar in downtown San Luis Obispo, Rachel Newhouse said goodbye to everyone and began walking home alone around 11:30 p.m. To get there, she had to cross the Jennifer Street pedestrian bridge, a small footbridge over the railroad tracks that led to the neighborhood where Rachel lived. It was almost midnight, and the area was deserted. Rachel walked lost in thought, unaware that a dark figure had been following her. This sinister presence had been watching her for a while. He wore a skull mask, the kind used on Halloween, to hide his identity. As Rachel climbed the stairs and stepped onto the bridge, the predator suddenly lunged from the shadows. Before she could react, he punched her square in the jaw. Rachel screamed in pain, but no one heard her cries on the empty bridge in the dead of night. He kept attacking until she passed out, collapsing onto the walkway as blood began to pool beneath her head. The attacker then grabbed Rachel by the hair and dragged her off the bridge. Dark red bloodstains trailed down the steps and to the base of the bridge. Parked nearby was his Ford Ranger pickup truck. He pulled out a piece of rope, tightly bound Rachel's hands behind her back, and shoved her into the back seat. Calmly, he drove away from the scene, following the railroad tracks for about 200 yards to a remote spot, then stopped. There, he ripped off her underwear and gagged her with her own pants. Rachel was completely restrained, her arms and legs tied, her mouth cruelly stuffed. What you've just heard isn't a scene from a Hollywood thriller. It's a true account of an attack that shattered the peace of San Luis Obispo, California, a small, quiet city on the Central Coast with a population of around 43,000. It's home to Cal Poly, California Polytechnic State University, and Cuesta College. San Luis Obispo is frequently listed among the safest cities in the country, with an extremely low crime rate. In the late 1990s, the city averaged just one murder per year, and only 2 unsolved homicides had been reported since the mid-1980s. Locals felt so safe that many weren't afraid to walk alone at night, or even leave their doors unlocked. But that sense of security was about to be shattered. Within just 4 years, 3 female college students from San Luis Obispo mysteriously vanished. The first was Kristen Denise Smart, a freshman at California Polytechnic State University. On Saturday, May 25, 1996, she attended an off-campus party and was walked home by 3 fellow students. She was intoxicated and never made it to her dorm. Kristen was never seen again. The second victim was Rachel Joy Newhouse, 20 years old, a communications student at Cal Poly. Rachel was known for being bright, attractive, and highly active on campus. She had a close relationship with her family, and her parents were incredibly proud of her. On the night of November 12th, 1998. She went out with friends to a bar in town and planned to walk home as usual. But like Kristen Smart, she was never seen again. The third victim was Aundria Michelle Crawford, 20, a student at Cuesta College who planned to transfer to Cal Poly to study architecture or interior design. At the time of her disappearance in March 1999, Aundria was temporarily living in an apartment on Branch Street in San Luis Obispo to focus on school. As a child, Aundria had been abused by a relative, but had shown tremendous strength in overcoming that trauma. That experience shaped her into a compassionate and resilient young woman, one who often reached out to help others who had suffered similar experiences. She had a sick pet cat and a boyfriend named George. On the night she vanished, George called to invite her to watch a movie, but Aundria declined, saying she had schoolwork to catch up on. No one could have imagined that the shadow of evil was once again approaching, this time targeting a girl who had already overcome so much. The successive disappearances of these three young women sent shockwaves through San Luis Obispo. Could it be that the town's worst fears had come true? Was there a predator lurking in the shadows of their peaceful community? On the morning of November 13th, 1998, the San Luis Obispo Police Department officially received a report of Rachel Newhouse's disappearance. She hadn't returned home the night before, and both her roommate and family had been unable to reach her. Around the same time, a local resident walking near the Jennifer Street Bridge noticed dried blood on the bridge and its steps. The scene was immediately cordoned off. Police collected blood samples and initially determined it was likely human, but couldn't definitively link it to Rachel. Lacking solid evidence, police first considered treating the case as a missing person investigation. However, something about the situation didn't feel right. Investigators sensed that this was no ordinary disappearance. Rachel was healthy, outgoing, and had no reason to vanish without a trace. And the strange bloodstains on the bridge might be the clue that broke the case. Police Chief Jim Gardner decided to assemble a task force to search for Rachel. He quickly reached out for support from the FBI and other local law enforcement agencies. A 24/7 command center was set up in a small police conference room where investigators gathered around the clock to analyze clues. Over 180 investigators and volunteers joined what would become one of the largest search efforts in the city's history. Friends and classmates posted missing person flyers with Rachel's photo on lampposts and storefronts across San Luis Obispo. Rachel's family offered a reward of over $100,000 for any information that could help locate her. But as the weeks passed, the leads dried up. No one had seen Rachel after she left the bar that night. No suspicious individuals were reported in the area. The blood samples from the bridge were sent for DNA testing. But in the late 1990s, such analysis took time. It wasn't until mid-December 1998, more than a month after Rachel's disappearance, that results finally came back. The DNA from the blood matched samples from Rachel's parents, confirming that the blood was indeed Rachel Newhouse's. The case had now escalated from a missing person report to a confirmed kidnapping and possible murder investigation. Yet, for months after Rachel vanished, police still had no suspects. Public concern began to grow, and local media questioned whether there might be a serial predator stalking students near the university. And just as the investigation seemed to reach a dead end, in May 1999, the second tragedy struck. On the afternoon of May 11, 1999, Aundria Crawford's mother, Mrs. Keogh, called her daughter multiple times, but received no response. As the hours passed, she became increasingly worried. That evening, Aundria missed an appointment and didn't reply to any messages, something completely out of character for her. Fearing the worst, early the next morning, May the 12th, Mrs. Keogh drove over 100 miles from Visalia, the family's hometown, straight to San Luis Obispo to check on her daughter. When she arrived, she was horrified. The back door of Aundria's apartment was wide open, and inside there were clear signs of a struggle. She immediately called the police. The scene inside Aundria's home made it obvious this was a violent break-in. A window screen had been removed, the small bathroom window was open, and blood was spattered on the bathroom floor. Police also found one of Aundria's earrings on the floor, along with handprints on the window frame and even on the ceiling. It was highly likely that the intruder had entered from the yard and climbed in through the bathroom window. There were unusual tire tracks outside and a few metal pellets scattered around. One particularly troubling detail. Aundria's family said her keychain, with a signature BA charm, was missing. There was no longer any doubt. A highly dangerous criminal was operating in the area. The special task force initially formed after Rachel Newhouse's disappearance was reactivated at full capacity. What followed was the largest manhunt in Central Coast history, involving local police, the FBI, state authorities, and hundreds of volunteers. Investigators also turned their attention to a list of known sex offenders and prior harassers living in the area. And it was this strategy that finally led to a breakthrough. A sharp-eyed probation officer, David Zaragoza, from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, came across a newspaper article describing Aundria Crawford's case. One detail caught his attention. The method of entry, breaking in through a bathroom window to attack a woman, reminded him of a case from 1987. That case from years earlier had also involved a violent home invasion. The perpetrator? Rex Allen Krebs. He had been released in early 1997 after serving 10 years in prison. David Zaragoza, a probation officer who once supervised him, decided to personally check on his former client. On May 15, 1999, Zaragoza made an unannounced visit to Rex Krebs's residence. There, he noticed that Krebs was wearing a back support brace and moving with difficulty. When asked about his condition, Krebs claimed he had fallen onto a pile of firewood and broken a few ribs just days earlier. But the explanation immediately raised red flags. If he had fallen hard enough to injure himself, there should have been visible scratches or bruises on his hands or arms, natural injuries from trying to break the fall. Yet Zaragoza observed that Krebs's arms and hands were completely unmarked. A chilling possibility crossed Zaragoza's mind. What if Krebs hadn't hurt himself in a fall, but while climbing through the bathroom window of Aundria Crawford's apartment? After leaving the residence, Zaragoza immediately reported his concerns to the task force. At first, some officials were hesitant. There was still no direct physical evidence linking Krebs to the case. But Zaragoza, deeply familiar with his criminal history and behavior, presented a compelling argument. The police agreed to act. An emergency search warrant was issued for Rex Krebs's residence. On May 16, 1999, Zaragoza and a team of officers executed a surprise search of the home and property rented by Krebs. What they found was truly shocking. Among Krebs's personal belongings, investigators discovered Aundria Crawford's Beer No. 8 keychain, the one her family had reported missing. This was irrefutable evidence linking him directly to her disappearance. Investigators also found a stash of metal pellets and a firearm, a clear violation of his probation terms. That same afternoon, Rex Krebs was arrested for violating parole and taken immediately to San Luis Obispo County Jail. Though he hadn't yet been officially charged in the missing person cases, Krebs had now become the primary suspect. The entire city held its breath, awaiting the outcome of the interrogation. But Rex Krebs was no ordinary criminal. He was a seasoned predator, hardened by years in and out of the justice system. When questioned about Rachel Newhouse's disappearance, he claimed he couldn't remember where he had been that night. As for Aundria Crawford, he insisted that on May 10th, he had been home all evening. He swore he had never even been near Aundria's neighborhood, and that the only reason he knew about the girls was from missing person flyers posted around town. Suspicious of his vague and evasive answers, investigators requested to search his home and vehicle. Surprisingly, Krebs agreed, perhaps believing he had hidden the evidence well enough. But he was wrong. During the search of Krebs's Ford Ranger, investigators found that the right rear seat had been removed. In the trunk, they discovered a roll of duct tape, a pair of binoculars, and a bottle of stain remover. These chilling items painted a grim picture, supporting the theory that the truck had been used to kidnap and transport a victim, and that Krebs had tried to erase the evidence afterward. A few days later, police conducted a more thorough search of his house. Inside, they found the missing car seat. It was stained with dark brown spots. A quick test confirmed it was human blood, and it belonged to none other than Rachel Newhouse. This became the golden piece of evidence that Rex Krebs could no longer deny. Later, police uncovered even more evidence. In an abandoned house near his property, they found an old cushion with a large blood stain that matched Rachel's, the key to Aundria's house, and a black plastic zip tie identical to the ones used to bind her hands. Most damning of all, fingerprints lifted from her window matched Rex Krebs's. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, investigators were finally able to get to the truth. On April 21, 1999, police entered the interrogation room holding Aundria's keychain and a photograph of the blood-stained car seat. Upon seeing them, Rex's face turned pale. He immediately confessed to everything. His confession lasted for hours, chilling with every word. He described in detail how he stalked, attacked, tortured, and eventually disposed of Rachel Newhouse and Aundria Crawford. Every detail matched what police had already deduced from the evidence. On the afternoon of April 23rd, based on Krebs's confession, investigators went to the exact location where he said he had buried the two victims. On a hillside in Sea Canyon, they discovered a suspicious mound of dirt. After digging about 3 feet, Rachel's body began to emerge in an advanced state of decomposition. She was naked, her brows slipped down to her arms, large patches of hair and scalp torn off, and bones partially exposed. It was a haunting scene. Even seasoned forensic experts gasped in horror. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. However, due to the advanced decomposition, it couldn't be confirmed whether she had been strangled or suffocated by other means. The next day, police dug behind Krebs's house and found another body wrapped in wire mesh, buried about 2 feet deep. Aundria's body was relatively well preserved, having not been buried as long. She was dressed in a black tracksuit with a Hotter Cafe logo, clothing that Krebs had put on her. Her eyes were still covered with tape, and her wrists bound with plastic zip ties. The autopsy revealed 2 lacerations inside her mouth and bruising on her head, consistent with a brutal beating. A rope wrapped 2.5 times around her neck was determined to be the direct cause of death. At this point, everything was clear. 33-year-old Rex Krebs was the man behind the nightmare that had gripped San Luis Obispo for months. As soon as the information was released, public attention quickly turned to his name, Rex Allen Krebs. Who was he? And how could someone commit such brutal crimes? Rex was born in 1965 in Idaho, making him about 33 years old at the time of the murders. He had a dark and traumatic childhood, filled with abuse and beatings. As a teenager, Rex became heavily involved with alcohol and gained a reputation for rebellious behavior. At the age of 18, he came dangerously close to committing a serious crime involving a young girl, though it remains unclear whether he faced significant punishment for it. After that incident, his family moved him out of Idaho to start a new life in California. But things didn't improve. Rex continued down a dangerous path. In the mid-1980s, he moved to the central coast of California. By 1987, at the age of 21 or 22, Rex committed a series of armed assaults on 2 women in the San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara areas. As a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison and was expected to remain incarcerated until at least 2007. However, due to parole and early release policies at the time, Rex was released after serving only 10 years, with an additional 5 years of probation. In 1997, he re-entered the community and returned to San Luis Obispo, California, under the supervision of a probation officer. During his probation, Rex appeared to live a normal life. He worked in construction, had a girlfriend, and the couple was even expecting their first child. No one suspected that behind the quiet exterior of this 32-year-old man was a violent predator with monstrous urges. On the night of November 12, 1998, Rex drove his truck near the Jennifer Street Bridge, where he spotted Rachel Newhouse walking alone. Something inside him snapped. He attacked her and took her straight to the remote cabin he was renting on the outskirts of San Luis Obispo. Near the main house, there was a small, abandoned A-frame cabin, secluded and isolated. Rex carried the unconscious Rachel into the cabin and assaulted her. Rachel eventually woke up in excruciating pain. She tried to resist, but with her hands and feet bound, there was nothing she could do. The more she fought, the more aggressive he became, seemingly deriving pleasure from her suffering. After he was done, Rex said his rage had passed. He would later confess, "When I get angry, I want to hurt someone, and after I've done it, the anger is gone." He tied Rachel's wrists and ankles behind her back, rendering her completely helpless. Then he stuffed her underwear into her mouth to silence her screams and coldly left her lying there while he returned to the main house to drink, as if celebrating his twisted act. About 15 to 20 minutes later, Rex went back to check on what he called his prize, only to find that Rachel had stopped breathing. It's believed she may have died from shock and the tight gag obstructing her airway. Rex later claimed he didn't intend to kill her and blamed her death on her own struggling, which, he said, caused the ropes to tighten. But regardless of the cause, the horrifying truth is that Rachel Newhouse died in agony, alone and terrified in that desolate cabin. Though momentarily shaken, Rex quickly let his predatory instincts take over. He dragged her body behind the abandoned house and hid it under a dense bush. He then spent the entire next day trying to clean his truck, which was still stained with Rachel's blood. But no matter how hard he scrubbed, the blood had soaked deep into the carpet and seats, leaving a permanent trace. He ended up cutting out the section of carpet that was stained, disassembling the back seat, and hiding those parts inside his house. The remaining pieces and other evidence were dumped in a public landfill. On the night of November 13, 1998, he returned to his truck, placed Rachel Newhouse's body into the bed, and drove to a remote wooded area where he had already dug a shallow grave. Under the cover of darkness, the killer quietly buried her beneath a thin layer of soil and returned home, continuing his daily life as if nothing had ever happened. Nearly 4 months later, the monster within Rex Krebs stirred again, driving him to seek another victim. On the night of May 11, 1999, Aundria Crawford, a young woman living alone in a duplex in San Luis Obispo, had just finished a phone call with her boyfriend at around 2 a.m. Only she and her pet cat, who was recovering from surgery, were in the house. Worried about her cat's health, Aundria opened the bathroom window for ventilation. All other doors were locked tight. She was always careful. But that one open window would become the fatal entry point. Krebs had spotted Aundria by chance a few weeks earlier and had been stalking her ever since. He memorized her daily routine, often lurking around the house, especially after drinking. Alcohol gave him courage. Around 3 a.m. that morning, slightly drunk, Rex Krebs crept into her backyard. Finding the bathroom window unlocked, he gently removed the screen and crawled through the narrow opening. He fell hard into the bathtub, injuring his ribs. Hearing the sudden noise, Aundria got out of bed to investigate. But as soon as she opened the bathroom door, she came face to face with a dark, menacing figure. Krebs lunged forward and attacked, knocking her to the floor. Before she could react, he twisted her arms and legs behind her back, bound them, gagged her mouth, and covered her head with a pillowcase. He then ransacked the home, taking some of Aundria's clothes, CDs, a VCR, videotapes, and even a small Expo keychain that she always carried, perhaps to stage the scene as a burglary and mislead investigators. He then took Aundria to his isolated cabin in Avila Beach, the same place where he had taken Rachel. And there the nightmare began. He assaulted Aundria on the bed, on the floor, and even on the coffee table. But he didn't stop there. He went on to commit a series of twisted, perverse acts using zip ties and household objects. He stripped the victim and dressed her in a black tracksuit from her own closet, partly to satisfy his desires, partly to make identification harder if she escaped. As dawn approached on May 12th, Krebs fell asleep. Though still blindfolded, Aundria managed to loosen the gag around her mouth. She tried to crawl out of the house, but the sound of her movement woke the killer. In a panic, he rushed over, grabbed Aundria, and attacked her again. After murdering her, he dragged her body to the backyard, just meters from the door. He dug a shallow grave, wrapped her in wire mesh used for animal fencing, and buried her in the cold earth. Then, as if nothing had happened, Krebs changed his clothes, drove to pick up his pregnant girlfriend, and brought her to the house for the weekend. They spent time together right there, just meters away from where Aundria's body lay buried. Later, he disposed of the evidence. Her clothes, scarf, rope, VCR, and a videotape were dumped by the roadside. But he kept her San Luis Obispo keychain and a few CDs as trophies. What he saw as mementos of power and control became the key evidence that would later convict him. Undeniable proof of his guilt and his deeply disturbed mind. After confessing, Rex Krebs was quickly indicted. Public opinion in San Luis Obispo was in shock. Crowds filled the streets, carrying banners and demanding justice. Public pressure pushed the case forward swiftly. In June 2000, the trial of Rex Allen Krebs officially began. However, due to the high-profile nature of the case in San Luis Obispo, the court decided to move the trial to Monterey County to ensure fairness and prevent jury bias. Despite being far from the crime scene, public interest didn't wane. Local cable networks even broadcast the trial live every day so that the people of San Luis Obispo could follow the journey of bringing this monster to justice. In court, Krebs was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, including kidnapping, sexual assault, and torture. He also faced over 10 additional serious charges. Prosecutor John Trice sought the death penalty. Defense attorney James Marple barely contested the charges, as Krebs had already confessed. The defense strategy focused on avoiding the death sentence by portraying Krebs as mentally unstable and out of control due to alcoholism. They cited his abusive childhood and long history of alcohol addiction in hopes of gaining sympathy from the jury. The trial lasted nearly 2 months. The jury not only heard Krebs's confession, but also watched video footage of the crime scenes and burial sites. Witness after witness stepped forward, tearing open deep emotional wounds. Aundria Crawford's mother fainted in the middle of her testimony while recounting the moment she realized her daughter was missing. The entire courtroom fell silent except for the sound of a grieving mother's sobs. The prosecution also called 2 women who had survived assaults by Krebs back in 1987. Through tears, they shared the trauma of how he had overpowered and manipulated them. Their testimonies moved many jurors to tears. In the case of Christine Denise Martin, a schoolgirl who vanished in 1996, Krebs was ultimately not linked to her disappearance. It wasn't until 20 years later that the case was solved, with the Flores brothers identified as the perpetrators. On October 20th, 2001, after nearly 2 months of deliberation, the jury found Rex Allen Krebs guilty on all counts, and the judge sentenced him to death. The entire community overwhelmingly supported the verdict. Krebs was transferred to San Quentin State Prison's death row, which houses some of the most dangerous criminals in America. Like many other inmates on death row, he filed appeals. However, by the end of 2019, the California Supreme Court had rejected all of them, upholding the death sentence. Still, due to Governor Gavin Newsom's moratorium on executions since 2019, Rex Krebs, like over 700 other death row inmates, continues to live in a small, solitary confinement cell with no clear execution date. Ironically, the same man who once pleaded, "Just execute me, I deserve it," is now condemned to live out his days in isolation, surrounded by 4 walls, left alone to face the court of his own conscience. Do you think this is the most fitting punishment for someone like Rex Krebs? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found today's story worth your time, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.